Let us waste no more time. Brian, welcome back to the podcast. How are we doing this morning?
All right.
Oh,
Matthew
boy.
McConaughey, as
Oh,
he
boy.
would say.
Here we go.
Let's do it.
Here we go. Brian, we have got some mastermind retreats coming up over the next couple months. I thought it was worthwhile bringing you on here because the topic itself and the theme can be applied to all of our listeners. And if you're a leader in any type of organization, even within your own, personally, if you're a leader within, environments around you, there are things here that we can apply. But for those who don't know what a mastermind is, just to kind of bring us into that world, what is a mastermind group and why has it been so valuable for our leaders?
Yeah, so it takes 9, 10, 11 leaders, owners, and makes them a peer group where the answer is in the room. It's your genius network in some respects. Who Not How calls it that, the book. And I've had a goal over the past several years of making these mastermind groups really solid peer groups of people who care about each other, learn from each other, help each other, which is coming up, is always an opportunity for them to meet in person and know each other personally better. For me, it's always been an opportunity to go into the lab and develop content. And safe to say, I've spent the last few weekends downstairs in my basement lab. And as I swim these days, I work through, I think I've come up with some really awesome content here. Whether you go into a retreat or not, this podcast is more about subject matter that we're going to hit now.
So what is that subject matter?
How I show up as a leader, how I show up. What I think you and I do pretty well, I know you do it well, is connect the dots to make a puzzle.
Yes.
And I've been looking at all the stuff we've done over the last several years. I'm pulling them together to really finish the puzzle that is how I lead, how you lead, and have self-awareness over those and know your blind spots as well.
It's a great topic, and we'll dive into this here. Is there any relevancy, to this point in time? Why this topic now?
Why this topic now? This topic now is probably because of the wisdom of my age. I've finally figured out the topic.
These things all come
These
together.
all matter.
Yeah.
Like we've been introducing DISC and Working Genius, situational leadership, and reflected best self, and all these things. And it's just more evident now. And I'm on this journey. I mean, I'm 62. Holy cow. I feel 40. Literally woke up last night at 4 a.m. thinking about this topic and getting jazzed about this topic. So I'm still like super excited because the puzzle pieces are still forming, the leadership puzzle pieces,
I mean, I imagine there's a couple weeks here until the first retreat, and I can only imagine that this topic is going to just become like tighter and tighter especially as you start doing the pre-work with individuals and start really kind of working the work. So you've mentioned this is about pulling different parts of kind of leadership things that we've talked about in the past, or working formats or concepts. What are the 6 concepts that you're looking to pull together here as part of how I show up as a leader?
Okay, so listeners, I want you to picture yourself looking down on yourself as a leader, and I want you to analyze yourself in 6 areas. The first one is strengths. What strengths do I have that not a lot of other people have that I need to bring each day? Next, Working Genius. Working Genius is a Patrick Lencioni profile that we've adapted. We are licensed to distribute it and teach on it, and we'll talk more about that. Third is your DISC. What are my natural behavior styles that I bring? Fourth is what's my leadership style? In situational leadership 2, there are 4 leadership styles that you need to adapt to situationally to who you lead. Unfortunately, we all have one natural style that we tend to use. We tend to overuse, and we need to be aware of that. Fifth is who are you leading? And we're going to pull it from the book, Who Not How, with Dan Sullivan. Your who worksheet. Who are you delegating to? And lastly, and maybe most importantly, what are your blind spots? And make sure you have people in your circle who can tell you what they are so you can be intentional. So do you see how this is a puzzle?
Yeah. I mean, if you've been listening to Out of the Hourglass for some time now, first, thank you. But second, you will probably recognize a lot of these different concepts because we've talked about them individually on the podcast. We've done Working Genius episodes. We've done strengths and reflected best self episodes. We've done situational leadership. We've done. I'm pretty sure we've done a who, not how, conversation. So this is really kind of pulling a lot of those, previous chats together, which is awesome. Let's hit each each one of these and just go a little bit deeper. Sure. So those of us who are looking down at ourselves from 30,000 feet can begin to understand what you mean. First, you say strengths. How does the strengths play a factor here in how we show up as leader? It's pretty obvious. One will think, well, I'm great at this, so this makes me a great leader, but it's more than that.
If I spend time focusing on my weaknesses, I'm all inside my head. I have a negative self-talk. The battery's draining. If I spend time working on what I do best, you move the ball forward so much more. And so focus on what you do well. So I'll just give 3 things about me.
Please.
One is I operate on the balls of my feet, not my heels. I can be on my heels, but that's a defensive mode. So I make things happen. I have no problem doing I call cold starts. I'm a catalyst, and that's one of the things that I do. So the second thing that I do is I ask questions. I ask, because I'm trying to peel back. The third thing, which is finding someone's best version of them. That has become my life purpose, to take each person that I coach and make them the best. So if I focus on those few things each day, I am impacting the world so much more than if I'm worried about things that I don't do well. Instead, hiring people to do those things.
Who, not how.
Who, not how. Exactly. So this came about in the whole reflected best self exercise that a lot of us went through. We did a best self portrait, and that's pretty key.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about understanding your team's working genius profile. How does that impact how you are a leader, but also how you lead them?
So let's talk about the 6 different working geniuses.
Okay.
There is wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. All very different. Every person, when you do this profile, you get 2 geniuses, 2 things that just excel at. You get 2 in the middle. I forget what that's called, but and then there's 2 things that are frustrations to you. And so my 2 are discernment and galvanizing. So I need to complete me. I need someone. So if you've seen Deirdre is enablement and tenacity.
Makes sense.
Deirdre literally listens to me when I'm talking about, and she makes things happen. And I'll galvanize people around it. I'll get excited. I discern. That's how I coach. So now picture everybody on your team doing a working genius survey. It's inexpensive. I think it's only $25.
Yes, it's not expensive.
And understanding where there may be a hole. So for instance, I know Steve Talkington did this, and he found out that he's the only one that has galvanizing. So when he's not there, there's no one galvanizing. It's an emotional leadership component. And so knowing what your team is, and you need all 6. You need someone to wonder what's possible. You need that. And then you need someone to take the wonder and start to invent. Now, invention is my 3rd highest, and I jump to it. But I don't like to wonder too much personally, because I think it's a waste of time. But other people love it and need it.
I know we did a working genius profile on our team a couple years ago, and I think it is maybe wonder and maybe invention where we have less in, which it's also fascinating to me because I think thinking about how many. I mean, you invented this retreat, content. We are always inventing and creating new resources and moving the ball along, but I think it's like the person. It's talking more so to like who lives and breathes creation of new things all the time.
That's right. That's exactly
and we do
right.
it because we have to and we're good at it, but we might not have somebody here who's like, all I want to do is create new tools.
That's right. I mean, our job is to help people implement hundreds of tools that are already out there, and to hold them accountable and to use discernment over what their particular situation's like.
So probably, I mean, it makes sense as to why a lot of our coaches have are discerning, and so it makes them a great coach.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So important to know what your team profile currently is so that you know how to lead them and place them in the right roles, but also how to hire.
Exactly. So key. Who are we hiring for, which fits into the 4th one, Ma.
The who, not how?
I'm sorry, no, the DISC one, the 3rd one.
Yes, you jumped ahead here. Let's talk about, we'll come to who, not how. I know that's a big one. But DISC, this is a common, thing that we talked a lot about here. How does this particularly play a role?
So I know what I'm good at. I know what I don't have and what I have. Now, how do I behave? What are so this is part of showing up. DISC, how dominant am I? I is influence, S is steadiness, and C is compliance. I also call it conscientiousness. And so knowing your natural style and knowing your adaptive style is really important to know where you need to adapt. So over the course of 20 years, I've had to adapt my D up because I'm a business owner. I had to be direct at times when I'm a natural IC. I'm a pleaser. And I think you might be that too.
So as I've gotten older, my S has grown grown a little bit. So I'm more like an IS with a pretty high C. So I as well need to learn how to raise my D, become more direct. I feel myself, or I see myself doing it more and more, not being as afraid to have those direct conversations, just because it is what it is. It's just business. Sometimes we just have to have the conversations and not necessarily attaching emotion to it. But I have to coach myself through it. It does not come naturally.
Remember how I started this call? I said, listeners, look down on yourself. The one thing about getting older is you start to have a little more self-realization. When I have important conversations, sort of have an out-of-body experience, and I'm looking down at what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. How am I showing up here? Am I saying the things? So now I'm more aware of what I don't do well. So it's like writing with my non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
So I've got to now be conscious of it and intentional with it and do it. And I'll tell you, after I do honor those things, being more direct with someone, it feels better. It feels authentic, like I should. My lower D, make up stories. How's this person going to respond to it? Knowing, and also knowing your details, knowing who on your team has the high C. So we know Deirdre and Sydney have the high Cs. Your adapted C's high, Mal.
Yes.
Like when you focus in, like I want you to proofread something. That's key. So yes, that's the third one.
It's interesting because crucial conversations is not a part of this 6 here, but I do think it plays a role because as a leader, you have to be able to have crucial conversations. If you cannot, people and things are going to walk all over you, and efficiency is going to go way down. But in order to have those crucial conversations, you have to be able to recognize how you show up.
Yes.
So I know when I have to have a crucial conversation, that means I need to raise my D and become more direct. But that also means I need to really pause, reflect, and choose how I want to go about this and write out what are the main things I want to hit here. Because otherwise, emotion takes over and, it doesn't work out the way that I want it to be. So while it's not part of this kind of main, retreat or concept, it plays a role.
Sure it does. And so if you've taken the disc, it's good to go back and read all the pages is like 40 or 50. And it tells you where your areas of improvement, might be. Study those because self-awareness is so critical to leadership, so critical the older I get. And we'll talk about blind spots here shortly.
I mean, a lot of our clients who are a part of these mastermind retreats, who've been working with us for a while, who did discs a long time ago, they're going to have to kind of pull out that document again and probably dust it off a little bit and really read it through, because we think we obviously, we get the letter assignment, DI, whatever that means. I would imagine a lot of them think that they know what that means. And so really encouraging them to revisit that profile assessment and kind of what it actually says about, how you show up is key.
You show up a certain way and you think that's just natural, but
right.
And someone else may be sort of thrown off by it. So being aware, like I've always said, my I sometimes is so high that I can overpower a lower I, higher S. I mean, Colin and I have had this situation. I come in like roaring to go on a topic, and his face is stoic. It's sort of, and I'm like, what's wrong with Colin? And what's going on is his computer program inside his head is processing what I've said, and so I need to learn that about. So therefore, reading other people's discs is pretty key. So to meet people where they're at. How do I show up? Do I show up with too much electricity in some areas? And I need to bring it down? So that awareness of that is so important.
You used to do that all the time when we were younger, when we fully didn't understand what this meant. It was like, he's just too much. Okay, let's move on to number 4 here, kind of the fourth element in this concept, and that is the leadership styles, which I think brings in situational leadership.
It does, and we haven't spent enough time on this part of situational leadership. Situational leadership is situationally leading different depending on where a person is on a task. A person is not at a D1, D2, D3, D4 level. They at a task, they're D1. So D1 is the enthusiastic beginner. They're probably overconfident, and we mistake their confidence for competence. That's what I've done. And then you get into D2, which is low competency, and all of a sudden commitment varies areas because they find out it's not what I thought it was. Then you get into D3 and you get into variable competency. They have some competency, and commitment is sort of middle ground. And then D4 is high commitment, high competence, someone mastering a task. Okay, so now I show up and I'm Brian and I lead one way. I have a natural style. Everyone has a natural style. And am I taking the time to diagnose where this person is at this task? And then once I find that out, I lead them a certain way, one of the 4 S styles. And so what I found out about me when I did a self-assessment is my natural style is an S4.
Interesting.
I delegate and expect. When I found this out, I'm going to mention Steve Talkington again. This is probably a decade ago, probably 12 years ago, when I hired Steve as a coach. I've been coaching Steve for maybe 5 or 6 years. Star, right? I mean, he had filled positions. He had put systems in place. We had done 90-day plans every quarter. And then
He's the definition of an implementer.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I gave him the keys. You're a coach. Worked up a contract, gave him clients. Go, buddy, go. And like 3 or 4 months later, he's like, dude, you threw me to the wolves.
It's a really great point because being a coach is so different than, being a business owner is different from being a coach. The two are not the same.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And so as a new person, he was a D1 in most of the coaching applications. So I need to give him high direction and low support. Support meaning emotional support. Why is that? Because high direction is actually viewed as support. Thank goodness you gave me direction. It's only when someone gets into D2 do I need to be high directive and supportive. You got this, Steve. Remember we talked about this? So do this, and this, right? Give me a call later. And then someone gets into D3. Now I'm kind of coaching, going back and forth. Tell me about that. What worked last time? Then when D4 is, now it's challenging them. So S1 comes off as micromanaging to a D4 person in a certain task.
Because they're like, I know how to do this.
Exactly.
I'm good at my job.
Why is he all over me on this?
Yeah.
I've done this before. But to someone in a D1, S1 leadership is not micromanagement. It is the direction they need to go from nowhere to somewhere. So we have a survey that I actually worked up, with the help of AI. I used some of these conversational models and came up with a survey that scores you and can tell you what your natural leadership style is. Again, how am I showing up? I have awareness over this. Now I can stop and diagnose and be a better leader. That's what it's all about, a better leader.
Yeah, because it's one thing to, learn the SL2 framework and kind of go through scenarios. But if you don't know what your natural way of showing up to those is before you're assessing, it's a blind spot.
Blind spot. So takeaway here is diagnose. Every time someone comes with you and asks you for direction, diagnose. Don't just go right to the answer because you're a hero. I solve problems.
We, and Steve will attest to this, we've come a long way with our coach training over time. We just had several of our associate coaches.
3 days.
3 days.
Five people.
Last week, folks who have been coaching with us, a couple new associate coaches who have been working as clients of ours for a while. Being a Nolan Consulting Group client is different than being a Nolan Consulting Group coach.
Yep.
And it's our job to teach them that framework. All right, let's now get to the who, not how. You were itching to jump to this earlier.
Well, so now we're on 5 of the 6 how I show up categories. Every who needs a who to do their how.
Sounds like Dr. Seuss.
It doesn't it?
Yeah.
And when I first read this book, I went for a run and came back, and I noticed in my backyard I had poison ivy all over these trees and things like that. And like, man, this is going to stink. I'm going to have to get into like a plastic bag and
spend your whole weekend
doing this. And I just read this chapter on you need who's in every part of your life. And I immediately send an email to the guy who cuts my lawn. I say, hey, do you guys remove poison ivy? And he said, sure.
Better you than I.
And it was gone in a week. I was like, whoa, and I saved myself because I've had poison ivy miserably for.
Yeah.
So we developed again through the help of AI I call it my who worksheet. And it's a list of about 20 areas in your life that you may need a who in. Business growth, operations, marketing, sales, human resources, personal finances, mental health, health and fitness, home and real estate maintenance, legal issues. And so this is also a genius network. So who are my who's in these areas? And if you're going to be a leader, your job is not to do, your job is to lead. And when you can pull up and you remember, like you're leading a band and you've got picture a band with instruments and it's just humming and you're able to see the whole field looking down. And so where's a gap in your life? Where don't you have who's that you're still finding yourself doing, therefore not advancing to the vision you want because you don't have all the who's, you know? It's hard to pull out and stop doing some of these things sort of personally. One of the who's that I've had in my life is financials, personal. I meet with my who once a quarter, and for the past 15 years, I've had a goal of when I'm 62, how much money I'm going to have. And holy crap, I just turned 62. I'm close to the goal. There's been some turbulent times, but had I not had that who, I wouldn't be where I am now.
It makes a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. I mean, one being we can't expect ourselves to know everything and be the best at everything. Part of the role of a CEO or a leader is to find people who are smarter than you in different areas, right? Like stop being the one that has to do it all. And so who is smarter than you in financials? Who is smarter than you in sales or more strategic than you in sales? Get them on your team.
Yes.
Ultimately, you want to work yourself out of a job, right?
You do.
Isn't that the goal?
Yeah. I mean, so you're a business owner. It doesn't mean you have to work in all these parts of the business. You're building a model. I always say business is a game, and you build a board with the best pieces. And now let's look at your life, and let's look at your primary aim of what you want out of life. And am I spending my time removing a poison ivy on Saturday, or am I going to see my grandkids? Really, that's a choice, and it's that real.
It is that
sorry,
real.
Ag. Tell the grandkids I said hi. I got to get this poison ivy out of here.
No, as I know your grandchildren, my nephews, they would not be pleased that you chose poison ivy over time with Pup Up. Another thing that kind of comes to mind here, especially within a mastermind retreat environment, and you know, if you're listening to this and you're not part of a mastermind retreat, you probably have some people in your close circle, a mentor or somebody who you talk about work and life with. They're probably more able to help you divvy out and break down who your who should be or what you're doing that you need a who for. Sometimes I think we get locked into, it leads us really nicely into our blind spots conversation, but we get so kind of narrow focused. We've got our blinders on, and it's when you open up to other individuals, other business owners, other leaders who can help you recognize where you need the who's.
Yeah, so who's your board of directors looking at you?
Yeah. Steve Talkington mentioned on a recent Legacy Mastermind call, gosh, Steve, you're getting a lot of shout outs today. Just shows how much we love you. He mentioned he looks to his mastermind group as his closest advisors, including his wife, but they mean everything to him. He has made critical decisions about his business because of the advice that they have shared. And that goes for every mastermind group, any peer group that you are a part of. If you're not a part of a peer group in your life in some capacity, highly recommend joining one.
Absolutely.
There's always going to be benefits to it. But this brings us nicely into kind of the wrapping around the sixth part of the concept here, and that is blind spots. What are they? How do we find them?
That's the biggest question. They're blind spots, so we don't know they exist. Luckily, I have people like you and Colin to tell me what my blind spots are.
We're not afraid to say them out loud.
But the person that really brings this to my light most often, and honestly, is Catherine Freeman.
I thought you were going to say your wife.
Oh, well.
Just kidding.
I feel like I could punch every week there.
Yeah. Also, we love you. You just had to, if we're not joking about you, we're not thinking about you.
So like, here's an example. I said something in a meeting, a full team meeting, what I thought was fine, and went on. And this is going back like 2 years ago now. First time where she felt like she could address me with blind spots. And during the week, I noticed there was something off about her. And finally, we had a one-on-one, and she punched me in the face.
Literally, everybody. We had to call 911. I'm just kidding. It was a figurative punch in the face.
Yeah, she was like, I can't believe you said that way. I'm like, what did I say? And then all of a sudden I'm like reflecting back, what did I say? And then I just said, God, to be able to tell me, Catherine, right away. I said, that is a blind spot for me. Total blind spot. So who's keeping you honest here? Let me talk about some more blind spots. Emotional leadership and the importance of it. I've had several leaders who have gotten their business to a point where it runs by itself and they go away. Take a month or two off, and who is emotionally coming into the office and providing that hard to even identify leadership, making people feel engaged, making people feel good about the work that they're doing.
The soul of the business?
Soul. It's the soul. And it's when you share the vision often, which is the other one, not sharing the vision enough, not sharing the why. So when you launch an initiative, you're doing something and people are like, what's going on? And to you, it's so clear why, but everybody else is like, why? So misengagement there because we're not doing that. Your facial expressions in meetings is a blind spot. I had that happen a couple months ago. There was a bad meeting that we had, and I walked out and go, why was that a bad meeting? What do I own there? I came in hot to it, and I started asking questions hot. Apparently, I overwhelmed people, and so that's important. Under-instructing and delegating, not instructing, and thinking you did, not setting clear expectations, that's a blind spot. For me, getting overly focused, I have the ability in a coaching call it be here now. And I heard coach once said, Jay Wright, Villanova basketball coach who won championships, talked about how he tells his players to be here now inside the lines. And I've adapted that. So I'll go from one coaching call to the next. And it's a strength to me that I can focus completely on the person that I'm with. But I can miss the battle outside of that. I can miss what's going on in the office. I cannot see someone who's disengaged. I can miss it, someone who needs me. And so I need to be intentional there, I put my head in the sand as a leader. That's not good. So knowing your blind spots so that you can either hire for them or adapt situationally to meet someone where they're at, showing up as a leader your people need you to be. So that's where we are.
I think it's going to make for some really interesting conversations at these upcoming retreats. You got folks headed to Park City, to Austin, to up near Detroit, Michigan area. And also this will be kind of a big topical session at the Grand Summit as well. So, again, if you're not a part of one of these retreats, this is a theme and a topic that we're going to kind of continue to really hash out. Brian, what would you say to listeners, whether they're going on this retreat or they're just listening to this podcast right now? What are some things that they can begin maybe focusing on? So one, they've listened to this podcast. Two, they've looked at themselves, from above and have kind of maybe addressed potential areas in each of those six concepts that you're going to be touching on. But what's something practical that someone could take away from today and try to start implementing?
Yeah, so I journal. I think people know I talk about it now and again. Have you journaled your strengths? I think that's important. And then are you being intentional using them? Asking people specifically what your blind spots are. I think that's really important. Get some people who are not afraid to tell you what they are. The Working Genius is a no-brainer. I would take that one. But I'd say most importantly, actually, when you're talking to any of your people, don't go with your first instinct. Pause, reflect, diagnose, choose how you're going to do it. Every problem is an opportunity to coach, not for you to be a hero and solve it.
I mean, it's very similar to coaches themselves. Sometimes you might have the answer to the problem that your client is experiencing, but it's important that you can help lead them there, but they need to be able to understand it themselves.
Totally. Real quick, the second day, we're going to also jump on your rocks. We call it moving future, where everybody shares what they've worked on in the past 6 months that has worked well, what big rock they're working on now, and what big rock they're working on down the road, and getting input from their peers on best directions and issues that they can help solve.
I love it. Ultimately, what this says to me is use the people around you to help you become a better leader.
And have self-awareness. Look down on yourself and separate yourself from the moment you're in. That is really an important mindfulness practice. That when you practice mindfulness as a leader, you slow down. Stillness is the key. It's a Ryan Holiday book. Be still. Don't rock the waters until you know what needs to be rocked.
Brian, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mal.